The Republican National Convention starts tomorrow. Ahead on Face the State, Ohio delegates are getting ready to carry out their duty to nominate the party's candidates for president and vice president. Hear from them about that responsibility and the possibility of Ohio Senator J.D. Vance being former President Trump's choice for running mate. Also, President Biden vows to stay in the race to the end, while some Democrats are calling for him to step aside after his poor debate performance. Top Ohio Democrats weigh in on the president's candidacy. Plus, efforts to support the hundreds of thousands of Ohioans living with Alzheimer's and dementia. The Ohio House passed two bills advocates say will really help. A representative of the Alzheimer's Association is in studio to explain how. Thanks for joining us for Face the State this Sunday morning. I'm Doug Petcash. Republicans are gathering in Milwaukee to officially nominate their candidates for president and vice president. The Republican National Convention starts tomorrow and runs through Thursday. We know former President Trump is expected to get the nod for president, but we don't know yet who he'll choose as his running mate. It could be Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Ohio has 79 Republican delegates. Some have been to conventions before, others are going for the first time. They'll be focused on the experience and the business at hand.
Workers are now setting up the Republican National Convention's main arena venue in Milwaukee. It's where thousands of Republican delegates from 56 states and U.S. territories will officially cast their votes to nominate former President Donald Trump for president. Ohio Republican Party Chair Alex Triantafilou is one of them. He has been at every Republican convention since 2004.
Well, these things are ultimately, a way just to come together as Republicans and to unite the party.
Franklin County Republican Chair Meredith Friedhoff is a delegate for the first time. She's excited to talk with delegates from other states.
See what's going on in their communities and on the ground and with their candidates. Really excited to learn some strategies.
They take the responsibility seriously as a key part of the democratic process.
We still have a robust two-party system. As much as it may be under attack sometimes, it's still an important part of how we select our nominees for president.
I believe we're going there to nominate President Trump officially to be on our ballot and also to show the solidarity and the unity in the Republican Party.
Ohio State University political science professor emeritus Paul Beck says the convention will essentially be a coronation of Donald Trump as the nominee and expects it to go smoothly.
I think it's going to be an easy convention for the Republicans. There may be a fight over his vice presidential running mate, but I doubt it. Actually,
that running mate could be Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. He is considered a top contender. The delegates we spoke to like that idea.
I think this is a whole new realm of time for politicians to be more outsiders, more well-rounded, have life experience outside of Washington, D.C.
He's a person who is the future of our party in many respects. So I think he would be an outstanding choice. But we will support whoever President Trump chooses, and I know Senator Vance will as well. But, forgive us here in Ohio for rooting for, our hometown guy.
Heading into the convention, attention is growing about so-called Project 2025. It's a nearly 1,000-page handbook that proposes a dramatic overhaul of the U.S. government. The handbook was created by the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank. Inside, there are calls for eliminating some federal agencies and moving many directly under presidential control. It also calls for doing away with the, quote, deep state bureaucracy by firing as many as 50,000 federal workers. And the playbook proposes rolling back protections for the LGBTQ community and infusing Christianity more deeply into society. The Heritage Foundation lists three main people leading Project 2025. All are former Trump administration officials. Despite this, Trump claims he knows nothing about the project, and he posted on Truth Social saying he disagrees with some of the things in the plan. Project 2025 says it is not tied to a specific candidate or campaign. Republicans are expected to officially approve the party platform on the first day of the national convention tomorrow. It highlights 20 promises the GOP wants to accomplish. At the top of the list is immigration and border security. That's followed by promises to end inflation, make America energy dominant, make the Trump tax cuts permanent for workers and no tax on tips, plus prevent World War III, restore peace in Europe and the Middle East, and build a Great Iron Dome missile defense shield over the entire country. The Republican Party platform also includes a change in the way the party is addressing abortion. The RNC's platform committee moved to adopt the document that does not include language about a national abortion ban. The platform states, "We proudly stand for families and life. We believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights." As I said, it does not include a national abortion ban or give a specific week at which an abortion would be illegal. The 2016 Republican platform mentioned abortion 35 times. The 2024 platform mentions it only once in opposing late-term abortions. It also says they will support mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF fertility treatments. At a news conference in Columbus Wednesday, Ohio Republican U.S. Senate candidate Bernie Moreno said this about the abortion platform.
It's predominantly a state issue, and we're going to work on ways to make certain that moms have better access to health care, that women have better access to contraception. There's not a Republican senator I know that's against any forms of the contraception that's reported in the media, and we're going to make certain that adoption services are more readily available.
Moreno has called for a federal ban on abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy and says he still supports that.
That's something that I believe that I think we can get to a place where after 15 weeks there's just some common sense restrictions.
Now, Moreno also told me during an interview on Face the State in March leading up to the primary election that he supports exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. Back in November, Ohio voters approved an amendment to the state constitution that guarantees the right to abortion and other forms of reproductive health care. Issue 1 specifically declared an individual's right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions, including birth control, fertility treatments, miscarriage, and abortion. It allows the state to regulate the procedure after fetal viability as long as exceptions are provided for cases in which a doctor determines the life or health of the woman is at risk. Viability was defined as the point when the fetus had a significant likelihood of survival outside the womb with reasonable interventions. Under Ohio law, abortions up to 22 weeks of pregnancy are legal. After that vote in November, Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown said in a statement, Ohioans made it clear that women's health care decisions should be between them and their doctors, not politicians. That's what I've always believed and will continue to fight for in the U.S. Senate. My opponents disagree and have made it clear they would overrule Ohioans by voting for a national abortion ban. While Republicans prepare to start their national convention, discussion and debate continue over whether President Biden should stay in the race for the White House. In the wake of the president's shaky debate performance, some U.S. House Democrats have called for him to step aside. No Senate Democrats have done that, including Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown. This week, I reached out to several Ohio Democratic leaders to see how they feel about President Biden as their candidate. The ones I talked to are standing behind him, while Senator Brown has not offered an opinion one way or the other.
President Biden is adamant that he will continue his bid for re-election. He started a letter he sent to congressional Democrats Monday saying, "I want you to know that despite all the speculation in the press and elsewhere, I am firmly committed to staying in the race, to running this race to the end, and to beating Donald Trump."
He has shown himself to be a successful president.
Ohio Senate Minority Leader Nikki Antonio is a presidential delegate whose vote at the August Democratic National Convention is pledged to Biden. She believes he is the best candidate for the Democrats.
If I have to choose between an old guy who cares about this country and cares about democracy and the people in the country, then Joe Biden is my candidate. The other guy is an old guy who is also a felon.
The Ohio Democratic Party is also standing behind President Biden. ODP Chair Liz Walters wasn't available for an interview but sent this statement. "This race is a choice between a president who wakes up every day to fight for working families in Ohio or a 34-count convicted felon whose only fight is against democracy and the rule of law." Longtime Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown has not expressed an opinion on whether President Biden should stay in the race and says he will not make any recommendations. The CBS affiliate in Youngstown asked him about it.
I'm not a pundit. I've talked to people across Ohio. They have legitimate questions about whether the president should continue his campaign. And I'll keep listening to people.
Senator Brown says he'll pass along what he hears. State Senator Antonio attended an event at the White House as recently as Christmas and saw President Biden in action. She believes he had a bad night at the debate.
That was not the person I have seen make a speech, be there greeting people at the White House. So clearly, in my mind, he had an off night.
Senator Antonio also says the wheels are in motion and the president already has the majority of pledged delegates ahead of the convention, so he is the only one who can make the decision about his candidacy. Senator Brown's opponent in the Ohio U.S. Senate race, Republican Bernie Moreno, called out Brown over his response in the aftermath of President Biden's poor debate performance. Moreno held this news conference specifically to criticize Brown for not making a definitive statement one way or the other on whether he supports the president staying in the race. He says anyone who watched the debate saw a man who is in cognitive decline, and he says Brown has known Biden for decades and is an important member of the Senate.
For him to say that he's not commenting on this because he's not, quote, a pundit is absurd on its face. He's a superdelegate. He will be making a vote in the Democratic Convention. He should have a very important opinion as to whether Joe Biden should be their nominee.
I reached out to Senator Brown's campaign about Moreno's comments. They referred me to the quote you just heard from Senator Brown earlier. Still ahead on Face the State, making strides in the fight against Alzheimer's and dementia, the latest medical advancement, and what's happening at the State House to support those living with the disease. And later, the wheels on the bus go round and round, powered by hydrogen fuel cells. And COTA is about to add a whole bunch of environmentally friendly buses to its fleet, what the Transit Authority's green goal is over the next 2 decades. Welcome back to Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. If you know someone living with Alzheimer's disease or dementia or someone who has died of it, you know how devastating the disease can be. It essentially robs them of who they are. The good news is researchers continue to look for treatments and cures and are making progress, and Ohio leaders continue to look for ways through legislation to help in the fight. The FDA just approved a new drug that could slow the progression of early symptomatic Alzheimer's disease. The drug is given in monthly infusions and has only been shown to work in people with very early onset symptoms of Alzheimer's. In a large trial, it slowed the decline of cognitive function overall by about 22% over 18 months. Doctors say the treatment is an incremental advance, but time matters.
And that may sound like, oh, what's the big deal? Well, that's a big deal if you have a wedding, something in your life, if you want to do something. We're not reversing it. It's not a cure.
You're slowing it down.
Slow the decline.
The drug is set to be available in just weeks. It costs $32,000 a year and is covered by Medicare Part B. According to the Alzheimer's Impact Movement, nearly 250,000 Ohioans over the age of 65 are living with Alzheimer's disease right now. Ohio has one of the country's highest rates of chronic conditions. In 2019, state leaders enacted Senate Bill 24, creating the first Alzheimer's disease and dementias task force. And last month, the Ohio Department of Aging released an action plan out of that to increase public awareness, improve access to quality care, train a dementia-capable workforce, advance research, and optimize financial support for people living with Alzheimer's and other dementias. Also, just last month, the Ohio House passed 2 bills that advocates say will help those living with the disease. House Bill 397 would create a public awareness campaign to increase education and understanding of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. It would also use that information in public health outreach programs. House Bill 24 would set the stage for access to diagnostic advancements such as biomarker testing to reduce the time for diagnosis and therefore access to new treatments. The Alzheimer's Association says without this legislation, dementia diagnoses may take up to 2 years. Both bills now go to the Senate. Joining me now to talk about all of this is Trey Addison. He is the Regional Director of Public Policy for the Alzheimer's Association in Ohio. Trey, first of all, thanks for being here
Absolutely.
today. Thank
you.
You know, as I mentioned, nearly 250,000 Ohioans, I believe it's just over 230-some thousand, have Alzheimer's or dementia over the age of 65. Is that number growing? What is the situation in the
Sadly,
state?
it is.
It's growing, and it's growing in pockets of the state. What we call is sort of slower growth areas. So in Central Ohio, we've been blessed with a robust economy, a lot of jobs, a younger population. You have the Ohio State, which is right here. Whereas when you go to Southeast Ohio, Northeast Ohio, Northwest Ohio, those populations are getting older, and that's where we're seeing an increase in diagnosis. And that's a big challenge, particularly in those particular areas, because access to health care and quality care is diminishing because they're going more so to the big cities. So it's hard to get a diagnosis.
So why does Alzheimer's Association feel that House Bill 397 is so important in the sense of raising awareness about the disease?
Yes, I think, Doug, it's a big deal because we have to get the word out. A lot of people, particularly in rural areas, urban areas, don't even understand what to look for when it comes to Alzheimer's and other dementia. We typically chalk it up in some communities to, oh, grandma's getting old, or dad's just getting old, or they're just not remembering everything they used to remember because of age. That's not correct. There's real issues. How do we educate the general public in the state of Ohio? What's going on with mom or dad? What does dementia even mean? What does it look like? That's the real aim and goal of House Bill 397. The other side of that is really engaging the Department of Health and the Department of Aging to put together a plan that they can go out now and execute in public awareness. Public awareness is critical when you think about the new drugs and treatments that are coming down the pipeline, when you think about any other opportunity to slow the progression of the disease. People have to be educated on the disease and know what to look for in order to take advantage of those resources.
And the other bill, House Bill 24, setting the stage for access to diagnostic treatments. How would this bill help patients, people dealing with this disease?
House Bill 24, in my opinion, especially in the era of treatment within Alzheimer's, is probably one of the most critical bills in the state of Ohio and across the country, because these bills are showing up everywhere in most states. It's probably one of the most, I would say, critical bills that we're seeing, partially because if you can get a biomarker test that gives you a baseline of, hey, you potentially have dementia or you have Alzheimer's, now you can start a path to treatment. That is a big deal to the point that the doctor made earlier, is that if you can get on a pathway, you can salvage some of that loss. You can go to a wedding. You can go to those experiences that you may not get. You may have been robbed from that. So how do you start with biomarker testing? That's why it's critical. House Bill 24 is for the state of Ohio, at least, it was a challenge to get there, but I think we're in good shape as we go to the Senate.
Would that be something that, even if somebody's not showing symptoms, but maybe they have the disease in their family, that they would get this test early on in life rather than when they first start showing symptoms?
Absolutely. It could be as simple as there's research now on biomarker blood testing. You go get a blood test and it says, hey, here's what we're seeing, here's what's showing up in your blood testing screen. Now you are on a potential path to treatment. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to know that I have it. But the reality is, if you know,
you can do something.
You can do something about it. If you don't know, it could be worse down the line. So how do we get in front of this disease and not behind it, specifically in pockets of the state where we see an aging population and we can start to slow the progression of the disease?
We talked about the two bills. Now, we also mentioned the task force that was created, 5 years ago now.
Yep.
How crucial has the work it's done been in this effort?
I give kudos to Director McElroy with the Department of Aging and Governor DeWine related to the task force. Part of that work has laid the groundwork to where we're at in the state of Ohio. You had multiple bills that have gone through the General Assembly that came out of that task force.
Including these two
Including these two bills, but equally first responder training for first responders in the state of Ohio to get trained on what dementia is and how it shows up in communities that they have to go interact with the general public. That's a big deal. We've seen more resources flow, research dollars. That was a recommendation that came out of the task force. We see the state allocating resources to research, allocating resources to respite care for Alzheimer's caregivers. That is a big deal, and that's probably one of the more critical legislation that has happened in Ohio, and we're seeing the rewards of that and the fruit from that labor come out now.
You talk about public awareness and people not knowing, what to recognize with this disease. If someone suspects something with a loved one, what should they do? How should they reach out?
The biggest thing, and I may be a little biased, but reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. It doesn't cost anything, but what it does is we help you navigate. Our programs teams help you navigate. Hey, here's what mom's doing. Okay, come in, we'll have a consultation, we'll have a conversation so we get a better baseline understanding. We don't recommend facilities, we don't do any of that, but we help you navigate the process. The other thing too is don't be afraid to go talk to your doctor about it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the critical functions that we'll be working on in future legislative sessions is how do we engage docs and nurses to start to have more critical conversation with patients. Sometimes doctors can say, I don't want to be the one to give them the diagnosis. That's a challenge. We have to change that narrative. If we can change that, we can help more people over time.
How encouraged are you by everything that's happening as well as the medical advancements?
I am more encouraged. I came to the association in 2019, so on the heels of the task force.
Yeah.
So we've seen the progress from 19 to 2024. I am more encouraged now than I was coming in because we didn't have a treatment. We were not in the era of treatment. We are now in the era of treatment. That is a game changer for people, for you and I, and for people moving forward, because it's only going to get better as long as resources flow to the issue.
Yeah.
When resources don't flow, we just forget about it. But we've seen it in the state of Ohio, and like I said, Governor Wine's leadership, we've seen the resources go there. We've seen people get impacted by that. And we see the General Assembly, honestly, taking a step forward. House Bill 397 passed unanimously.
Yeah.
That shows you every member of our General Assembly cares about this issue, which is critical.
And finally, how can somebody watching help in the cause?
Absolutely. I think they can reach out to go to alz.org. They literally, that website will help you navigate whether you're someone who's dealing with this issue on the front lines as a caregiver, whether you want to be an advocate. All of those things are at alz.org. We also have our Central Ohio chapter here. Vince McGrail is the chapter exec for this particular area in Central Ohio. His team does a phenomenal job in doing the day-to-day work and what I call, really God's work in helping families navigate such a challenging issue. But I'm optimistic, and I think now we're in the era of treatment, so we're all excited about that.
Well, Trey, with what you've said today, I hope this really, maybe helps somebody who's watching just to, get answers, start finding out what's going on with mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or something like that. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, still ahead on Face the State, aiming for zero emissions. COTA is getting closer to reaching that goal with its latest major purchase, and the federal government is picking up the tab. Buying buses that run cleaner. The Central Ohio Transit Authority, or COTA, received a grant of nearly $23 million to do that. The money comes from the Federal Transit Administration and will pay for 10 brand new hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. That's different from a fully electric vehicle. Basically, the hydrogen fuel cell allows the bus to produce its own electricity. Representatives with COTA say their goal is to have a 100% zero-emission bus fleet by 2035. They also say they will achieve net zero carbon neutrality by 2045. And this is becoming the new norm. Moving forward, representatives with COTA say the company will only buy zero-emission vehicles.
So the buses that COTA is replacing have exceeded their useful life. They're old. And these new electric and hydrogen buses will ensure more reliable rides and result in far fewer maintenance costs. So that means more money in the agency's pocket, agency's coffers. That money can then be reinvested in service and in the communities that we serve.
The grant will also help build a new refueling station at the McKinley Avenue facility. Thank you for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you back here next Sunday at 11:30.